Hello again, I'm Gene Edwards, and welcome to Conversations from Mississippi ETV. Tonight, we are going to talk about Willie Morris. Willie would have been 65 on the 29th of November, and that was a night that all of his old pals got together to tell Willie stories and to celebrate the republication of his first book, North Toward Home, and his newest book, My Cat Spit McGee. Jill Connor Browne was there to talk about the book Willie helped her write, and she is here tonight. And Rick Cleveland was there. He was one of Willie's closest pals. He is here too. And later, a conversation with Willie Morris that you've not seen before. But first, welcome, Jill and Rick.
Thanks.
How did you meet him, both of you?
I met Willie because of my own writing, that when I was on the What Do You Know show, when they came here with Michael Feldman. If you've seen the show, you know he's mean. So when they asked me to be on the show, I said, who? Because there's always a fatted calf, you know, somebody that's the burnt offering.
Right.
And they said, you know, it's the old blues man. I said, well, it's not going to be him. And Willie Morris, it's not going to be him, and me. So it was me. And it happened that Joanne and Willie were sitting in the audience in front of where I had been sitting, where my friends were sitting when I was on. And so while I was on, that my friends reported to me after that Joanne and Willie were saying, who is she? She's funny. Do we know her? So I used that as my entree to insinuate myself into their lives and get them to help me with my writing, which they did. I just called them up and said, I need some help.
And he was so generous, wasn't he?
He was so generous.
You could call him anytime.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I just called and reminded him who I was, and he said, sure, we'd love to help you.
Come on over. Mm-hmm. And there you were.
Yep.
And you? Was it through your dad? Or?
No. When Willie came back to Mississippi as a writer in residence at Ole Miss, I was covering Ole Miss for the Clarion Ledger. And Warner Alford, who was the athletic director at Ole Miss at the time, got us together at a reception they were having for the old SEC Skywriters. And Willie, you know, as he always was so kind. He said, I've read your stuff. I really like your stuff. Come here, pull up a chair. We need to spend a couple hours together. And we did, you know, and that's how.
And off you went.
Yeah, and
your life was never the same, was
Never.
it?
No, never the same. And then when he moved to Jackson, of course, that was just, what a bonus. Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that story about what happened on the night that your dad died, that Ace passed away.
Oh, yeah. It's an amazing story.
Willie was on a book
Willie
tour.
was on a book tour in New Orleans, and I guess it was New York days. And he got a call from Joanne, or he had called from a restaurant where they were all having dinner.
I think he told me, was he having dinner at Galatoire's or someplace?
Yeah, it was
someplace like that.
Yeah, and Joanne told him that Dad had passed away, and Willie excused himself from the dinner and walked outside and hailed a cab, said, I need a ride. I said, where are you going? He said, Jackson, Mississippi. And
a friend of mine's dad has died.
Yeah, a friend of mine's dad has died, and I need to get home. And it, I think the tab was $300, but the best part of the story is that he and the cab driver became like bosom buddies.
I'm sure it was a life-changing experience for the cab driver.
Yeah, you spend 3 hours with Willie, your life's going to change a little bit, I guarantee you.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, and they talked about that so much. Everybody has those stories to tell about getting in the car and going to look at graveyards and driving around Yazoo and all those other things. All those people who were involved in making those movies fell under his spell, didn't they?
They did. He was just one of the most charismatic, quietly charismatic.
Yeah,
people. He was not flamboyant.
Yeah,
you know.
Not at all. I wrote a column about a week or so after he died, and with a lot of my personal experiences with Willie, and I must have gotten a jillion emails and calls from people that I didn't know, had never heard of, who all had their own personal experience. It might have been at the Gin, the bar in Oxford. It might have been at a bookstore at a signing. It might have, yeah, and might have been at the somebody that played Little League baseball with him, or American Legion baseball with him. But everybody had their own, you know, their own story.
There was always a kind thing that he did, or
yeah, it was something that made a difference in their lives.
You know, I met him at the Little League baseball field Do you know that story?
Mm-mm.
When he, years ago, when John Evans convinced him that he should write the poem for the start of the Little League season, John also convinced him that he should come out and read that prayer to begin the season.
There,
and I had just moved here. I had just begun working for the television station, and I think I read it in your column. Did you print it in your column?
Yeah.
You printed the prayer in your column.
At least
I read it.
parts of it. Yeah.
That's kind of neat. And I called John, and John said, "Well, you know, Willie's going to read this thing." So we went out and covered it, and I got to meet Willie, and that was it. Hooked. Ever since. Boy, he was nervous that night, wasn't he?
He was.
He was nervous before performances. Yeah.
He was, but then it was like it always something clicked in, and he was great. One of the last trips he and I made together was for Cool Papa Bell Day, the day they dedicated a monument to Cool Papa Bell
up in Starkville, wasn't it?
And he was a little bit nervous on the way there because he was going to be speaking, and then he gets up there and they, you know, turn the mic on and there's cameras going, and it's like he had everybody spellbound.
He was great.
Yeah.
One of the last times that I was with him, too, was at Indianola when they did the Medgar Evers Remembrance Day up there, and Charles was there, and Willie was there, and everybody was together, but you could tell he was really nervous. Did he have any idea he was so ill? Did anybody?
No. No. I mean, we knew he wasn't going to run a marathon, but I mean, it was. Yeah.
And well, in a lot of ways, he did run a marathon.
Yeah.
His life was a marathon. You know, you always knew the way Willie lived his life that
but
something could happen.
He appeared to be getting away with it.
Yeah, but he appeared to be breaking all the rules and getting away with everything.
Right. Right.
You know,
and I guess that's why it was so shocking to everybody when
it was so sudden.
When it was so sudden, and he was just gone, and all the other people you think of who were saved at the very last minute, and
we really thought it was going to be a wake-up call, and you know,
he'd finally quit smoking, and he finally quit all those other things.
But we didn't get that.
How did he help you as a writer?
Oh, God. You know, I mean, I went and talked to Joanne, and she told me what to do, and I sat about doing it, but then she would work on it in the daytime when I gave her the manuscript. She would work, and Willie would work on it at night. And sometimes he would change just one word on a page. And Joanne would just go, God, how stupid are we? Why couldn't we think of that? And then the main thing he did was just change the whole feeling of my book, was that, because a lot of it is pretty wild humor, as you know.
Your book is the Sweet Potato Queen's
Sweet Potato Queen's Book of Love, and he loved the humor in it, but there's also a lot of sweetness in it, and he said that was the most important thing, and that I had to close with that. I had to bring them back to that, and so that's what we did, and it's most people's favorite part of the book, where I talk about Charlie Jacobs and people that we've known.
That's the kind of writer he was. You know, it always struck me, especially during the Medgar Evers book, it struck me that there were some critical things that he wanted to say, that there were some things that he may have felt deep inside about the way that film turned out. But gosh, he was Willie. He just couldn't say those things, could he?
No, he was just sweet, sweet man.
He just couldn't be mean-spirited.
No, there was not a mean bone in his body, and he was, I mean, so what a gift to me as a baby writer, you know, to have him, you know, take an interest in me and just be so generous with his time and thoughts.
So proud when it was successful.
He was so proud.
Was he?
So proud.
Yeah. And your columns, he was the same way, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was like an idol to me, because I mean, anybody that makes their living writing words, when you read Willie, it made you think. I mean, he made writing look easy, and it's the hardest thing in the world to do. I mean, it's like Red Smith said, it's easy. You just go in there and open a vein and bleed. But when you read Willie, he made it seem so easy. I think what he helped me with more than anything else is he made me see things differently. Just from talking to him, Willie always saw the big picture. You know, he always, and he helped. He helped you. I mean,
well, there'd be stuff going on, you know, people, and you know, and he was always in his corner, and no matter what was going on, I mean, he would be sitting there, and there'd be just kind of this far-off look, and then, you know, after a few minutes, he would just expound on something that was just a whole different way of looking at what was right in front of us. But that's just how he was.
That's one of the things that, you know, when we heard that somebody had gotten Willie's eyes and could see.
Yeah.
You know, the first thing I thought, wouldn't it be something if they could see things the way Willie saw? You know.
Willie Morris was one of the best people to visit with on television. And a couple of years ago, before they started filming Skip, and just before the release of the Medgar Evers book, Willie came by this studio to talk about a book that he wrote and contributed to, a book about coming of age. I am old enough to read this book.
I don't believe it, Jimmy. You and I have had so many conversations over the years, both on the air and off the air. I don't think you're old enough.
Well, it's a confession I never made before.
Well, you don't look it.
Thank you. But I attended your wonderful birthday party.
It was my 30th. Right?
Yeah, when I guess that was the night that you discovered that you were old enough to read the book.
That's right, or to write for it.
Or to write for it. Did you discover that night that you were becoming cranky as...
Well, I'd had intuitions that my crankiness was giving away to a more mellow tolerance. But as I age, I had the strangest experiences I write about in this book. For about 3 hours every morning, I have reveries, kind of half dreams and half reveries of my transgressions of my past, kind of diabolic reveries, but not major transgressions, only semi-transgressions.
Just the minor.
But it's done something to me in a way, and I'm a writer. I make my living as a writer. I think we all, or most of us, mellow as we age. I'm glad that I think I've mellowed. It helps to have a good marriage and 3 spirited cats and to live in Jackson, Mississippi. But I think this is a very interesting
tell me
collection.
about this idea. Tell me about the...
Well, it's Reader's Digest books, and I think this book's going to be a bestseller. It got a great review. I think New York Times, they think it was a gold mine of wit and wisdom. But it's got John Updike. It's got Elie Wiesel, a Nobel Prize winner, right on down the list. And when they asked me to contribute to it, and they gave me a roster of who the others were, and they were all over 50, thank God. Why not?
Did you write specifically for it, or had you done this piece for someone else?
I'd actually done it for a magazine called New Choices, which is owned by Reader's Digest. But I'd done 3 or 4 pieces for this very strange magazine. It's based in New York, and over the 50s readership. First one I did was on the Byron de la Beckwith trial. Otherwise, I would not have written about that if they hadn't asked me to. But I think the New Choices magazine and Reader's Digest sort of collaborated on this particular book. I think it's a little gold mine. My friend Larry L. King, as opposed to Larry King, the Larry L. King who wrote Best Little Whorehouse in Texas and other works, I think he finally, at the end of his piece, says, I've scribbled it down, the more you get older, the more your furniture is worth. But
who are your other favorites in here? This must be like a reunion, an old home week for you.
A lot of friends of mine. Arthur Miller, of course, our distinguished playwright, Death of a Salesman. Scribbling down, Arthur discusses the meaning of family and what keeps it from chaos. John Updike ends his essay about getting older with 2 suggestions. 1, love one another, and 2, seize the day. My old buddy Dan Wakefield says, cultivate young friends and learn from them. Bell Kaufman, the importance of 3 or 4 deep friendships, and quotes Emerson, the only way to have a friend is to be one. Richard Rhodes' family values are practiced, not preached. Penelope Lively ponders the power of memories, especially that vision of the world we preserve from childhood, which as a writer and a man, I've tried to preserve that, having grown up in Mississippi. I have so many memories, it's almost like a, you know, a storage vault.
Do you find yourself now in a rush to get them all down?
Not really, Gene. I find that I consistently work. I don't have that terrible urgency toward, you know, producing quickly and a lot as I did as a younger person, but I'm constantly working, and I indeed have to work because I really have no choice but words. And I've kind of reached the point where I kind of like writing. For a long time, I thought writing was a sort of iron maiden of angst. I don't feel that anymore. I feel the urge to write, and it's not that I enjoy it so much as that, you know, I have to do it, and what I really want to do.
Do you do it every day?
When I'm really working on something big, I do.
You do?
Try to put in about my 4 or 5 hours a day. Living on the banks of Purple Crane Creek, which overflows in the rains, which it is today, on this day of rain. And I feel, you know, pretty good about my work. I just stick to it.
I want to talk to you about a couple things that are interesting that are happening in your life. This book is going to be popular.
Yeah, that's a collection.
But this book is your book, and this is the rough copy of it, and we're going to do a whole lot more about it as the weeks go along and actually get published. This has been a labor.
It was a tough one. I didn't think it would be so tough. It's not per se about the movie The Ghosts of Mississippi, although that's sort of the organizing thread that runs through the narrative. It's a profoundly personal book. It's about me. It's about Medgar Evers, God bless him. But I spent a lot of time in Hollywood. Merle Evers and I were the consultants on the movie. And I spent more time in Hollywood than I ever had in my life. I got a lot of Hollywood stuff in it. Very bizarre material, but it's...
But there are a lot of issues here that you hadn't addressed before.
That's right.
Which you hadn't addressed with yourself. Maybe.
Exactly. And that's why it was so difficult, and it's why I'm glad I did it. Addressing a lot of national and cultural issues, which I had never come to head with so much in my whole writing career.
And I'm going to spend a lot more time talking about the ghosts of Medgar Evers as we get closer to the publish date. I have 10 seconds left to mention wonderful news about a movie.
They're making a movie, Hollywood is, of my recent book, My Dog Skip. They're going to film it in Mississippi in the spring, 2 months. And this is definite. The guy who did Rain Man, The Natural, and Diner, and they're still auditioning, Gene, around the country for a dog who can bark with a Southern accent. So, your fans out there, if you got a dog who can bark with a Southern accent and is an English smooth-haired fox terrier, you'll make millions.
You'll do it. Always fun.
Always.
Well, so that was 2 years ago. The movie's coming out here after the first of the year. You've both seen the movie.
It is so wonderful.
Willie saw it before he died, didn't he?
He loved it, too.
Yeah, he loved it. In fact, the last time he talked to both of my kids was he called them from New York right after he'd seen it, told them, Annie and Tyler, you're both stars.
Because they're both in the movie.
They're both in the movie. In fact,
and Bailey's in the movie.
Right.
My daughter's in it.
My son is actually strikes little Willie out in one of the big scenes in the movie.
Tyler's got big scenes.
It was interesting to watch both of you watching that, because when we talked to Willie about being in a rush to get things all down, you said, well, he should have been.
Yeah, I wish he had been. There was a baseball book in his workroom, the notes, because he wrote everything on little note cards, little chicken scratching, you know how he wrote. and they're all laid out in order. I mean, he was about to sit down and write it, and it was, you know, Rick had talked to him about it a lot. It was going to be great.
It's fascinating to see how he outlined a book, because it's index cards that go up and down, and cocktail napkins too.
Oh,
by
yeah.
the way, that go up and down this long table, and they go up, and it's, and that's how he has the book outlined. And 2 days after he died, Joanne took me up there and showed it to me. And I know enough about a lot of the stories that he had on the cards.
Right.
It was going to be a wonderful book. It was going to be an incredible book.
I love that line of Bill Styron's about Willie having the most elegantly furnished mind.
It's the best, yeah.
Because all those stories were there. My gosh, I never met anybody in my whole life who had such a wealth of material tucked away in his mind.
And just
He's not only the sweetest man I ever know, he's the smartest man.
He really was.
He just knew so much. Well, he's an intellectual.
had a great vocabulary.
But you had no idea that he was doing all that stuff. That's one of my treasures, is that the last time that we all went out and had supper together, we were talking about the Mississippi Century, the last 100 years project that I've been involved in. And he had several writing suggestions and ideas and was working on his own.
And he wrote them on a cocktail napkin for you.
No, he wrote them. He wrote them on his checks. So at home, I have all of these checks of Willie's that I'll never get back to Joanne.
Well,
you know.
we have a check that he wrote to Bailey for $33.33 for editorial cat advice. But Tyler's got one.
I've got a check that he wrote. Tyler's got a check that he wrote him for $5 million.
Oh, my.
And in the notation down at the bottom, it says, "For books!" exclamation point.
Very important. Well, I have a check of Willie's, and in the amount it says, "It all begins with the land," and that was what he had planned to use as his starting point in his book about the century. Tell me how he'd feel about the cat book, because he didn't like cats.
But he came to. That was out after he got my daughter Bailey to be an extra in the movie. My dog Skip, and she read the book, and then she said, "But you know, when we've been over to the house, they have cats. So how did that happen?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." And she said, "Well, he ought to write a book about that, about how he's a cat person now and how that happened." And so I told Joanne, and she said, "No, Bailey will have to tell him. He will listen to her." So, and she's very shy, so we just dragged her over there and threw him out in the backyard and made him talk. And of course, you know, Willie, and he drew the best out of everybody, and he certainly did with Bailey. And they spent an hour or so out there, and he came back in and announced he was going to write a cat book, and did.
And he threw himself into it 100%.
He did. I mean, he cranked that one out, and got Bailey to write stories, and that's when he wrote her the check for $33.33 for editorial cat advice. Said it was the first installment. But that's one of the greatest gifts to me that and I'm sure Rick feels the same way, is what Willie meant to our children. And I mean, we have that personally, but he certainly, with all his books and everything, has made a great contribution to childhood forevermore.
Yeah, he was so good with children. One night I was putting Annie to bed shortly after he died, and she said, "You know, Daddy, Willie always made me feel so smart." Now, I mean...
He wrote in Bailey's copy of The Ghosts of Medgar Evers to my pal Bailey, Ms. Wizard. He told her that phone game. "At age 10, you have sensibility in your heart. You have greatness in you. Read good books. Read, 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 read," underlined. "Then read some more. Believe in who you are. Trust your imagination. Be yourself. Have fun. Laugh and cry. Don't be afraid to cry or to laugh. Think a lot. Keep your eyes and ears open. Don't miss anything. I believe in you. Love, Willie." And, you know, she didn't know her grandfathers. And so that's what he was for her. And so he made her feel better about herself because she knew how special he was. And so by extension, you know, that if he gave her his time and attention, then she must be special too.
And he was the same way with your kids,
Absolutely.
and most any kid that he met.
Absolutely.
And all the kids who were involved in that movie became his best friends, too, didn't they?
The Hollywood actors.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody. Cab drivers, waitresses,
Yeah.
everybody.
And he became friends again with his own son, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Sure did.
He wrote a piece in the Parade magazine, I think it was in 1981, and he ended it with a quote from Thornton Wilder. It said that the greatest tribute that we can pay to the dead is not grief, but gratitude. And I think that's what we feel for Willie.
It is a wonderful thing to me that the university press people have decided to republish North Toward Home, because as we saw at the bookstore the other night during that birthday celebration, there are dozens and dozens of people who are going to be reading it now for the very first time and paying attention to it, and that's a terrific, terrific gift, I think.
All his books are doing great on Amazon. You checked it; they're all.
Oh yeah.
Well, I mean, people are really, and he would just love that. It's very important to him.
I hope that people rediscover his sports books, the books that he's written about sports, because he's, I mean,
He thought the Marcus Dupree book was his best book.
Absolutely, but some of his short stories, Always Standing Against the Curve and the Fumble, are the best sports story, best I've read. I mean, he was just one. He loved sports so much, and one of the lessons he's taught me was that we always write best about what we care most about.
Well, he was the best, and we miss him, and we love him,
But we're grateful for him.
But we're grateful for him.
And to
You know,
him.
I'm constantly reminded of Bill Miner standing up in front of that whole group the other night and mentioning the fact that Willie was kind of the glue that held all those people together.
That never would have crossed paths otherwise.
And what are we going to do now?
Keep on.
Well, now we're just going to celebrate him. Thank you, both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Come back and we'll talk about the Sweet Potato Queen book. All right.